Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistanis will be observing Kashmir Solidarity Day tomorrow to express their unwavering support for the just struggle of the Kashmiri people for their inalienable right to self-determination. This particular Kashmir Solidarity Day is observed annually on 5th of February. Minister for Kashmir Affairs, Amir Maqam, has said, let me quote him, India is committing grave human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but it cannot suppress the just struggle of the Kashmiris. Pakistan will continue its moral and political support to Kashmiris. International community must fulfill promises made with the Kashmiri people, unquote. Likewise, the Corps Commanders Conference has also expressed solidarity with the resilient people of Kashmir and strongly condemned the ongoing human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, recognizing these actions as serious threat to regional peace and stability. Reiterating Pakistan's unwavering support for the legitimate struggle of the Kashmiri people for their right to self-determination as enshrined in relevant UN Security Council resolutions, the forum emphasized the significance of international engagement in addressing these persistent violations. Also, according to Kashmir Media Service, posters reading "Thank you Pakistan" have appeared in various areas of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, including Srinagar. Also, Inter-Services Public Relations released a song for the occasion, Kashmir Banega Pakistan. Let me quickly bring in some stats before you. Since January 1989 till 31st of January 2025, according to Kashmir Media Service, there have been 96,408 total killings at the hands of Indian occupation forces of the innocent Kashmiris, 7,375 been custodial killings, 172,567 innocent civilians have been arrested. Now, regarding structures which have either been arsoned or destroyed, they are 110,525, women widowed 22,980. Now, the number of children which have been orphaned, that is 1,07,974, and women who have been molested or gang raped are 11,265. These stats since January 1989. We've also seen these brutalities, the atrocities, the gross and the grave human rights violations on the part of Indian regime and its occupation forces in Iiojk have increased manifold since the revocation of Article 307. To discuss this particular burning issue, a contentious point between Pakistan and India, and the just struggle of the Kashmiris for their inalienable right to self-determination, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani, Chairman, Kashmir Institute of International Relations. Mr. Wani, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to be joined by Dr. Waqas Kausar, Kashmir Affairs expert. Dr. Kausar, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Mr. Wani, we'll go into the historical background of this particular dispute, how it has evolved over time, what has been the international community's response, how Pakistan's position has been consistent, and that continuous sacrifice on the part of the innocent Kashmiris over the years and decades against this Indian brutality. First of all, let's talk about the stats which I've quoted from Kashmir Media Service. How's the situation at this particular point in time, especially since the revocation of Article 370 and 35A?
You see, the states you gave us, they reveal the whole story of Indian occupied Kashmir, what has been happening there since decades, and especially in the last 3.5 decades. When you are asking me about the after abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, until then there was a military repression only. The military repression of all types was in there. draconian laws which facilitate these human rights violations and give impunity to the armed forces. This was happening all over in Kashmir, and none of the security forces or the Indian occupation forces was brought to justice, and till date no one has been brought to justice. But after August 5th, India started constitutional warfare also, which we say constitutional terrorism of India. After that, by trying to disempower Kashmiris, dehumanize Kashmiris, especially Kashmiri Muslim, through change in the constitution, through some legal frameworks they made, because the way they changed the special status, they took the Article 370 and 35A. We have the Supreme Court, Indian Supreme Court's earlier decisions that this article is non-derogable. It cannot be taken back, and Parliament cannot take it back. But since now the Supreme Court of India validated whatever the Indian government did, and after that they enacted about 200 new laws in Indian occupied Kashmir which were not earlier there, thereby each and every power now vests in New Delhi. There is no power with the Kashmiris, and they cannot exercise. Even the newly constituted assembly which was constituted over there, people voted against the will of and they knew already, BJP, that people of Indian occupied Kashmir will vote against the will of the BJP, against their policies. So they took all the powers and they were shifted to the Lieutenant Governor. So be it police power, police order, be it executive order, or be it the appointment of judicial officers, all these powers lie with the Lieutenant Governor. So when such a situation is happening, so you have no rescue there, nobody will come to your rescue. And now when I am talking to you, only yesterday the news is that about 500 people have been rounded up by the Indian police and other forces in the length and breadth of Indian occupied Kashmir.
Dr. Kausar, now talking in as far as the historical perspective of this particular dispute is concerned, I want you to shed a little light regarding that also, and how this particular dispute has evolved over time.
Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. I mean, just before going to that dimension, I was just thinking on the statistics that there is always a human dimension of all the conflicts. And when it comes to Kashmir, this is unprecedented. I mean, the way people across the society, including our children, our youth, our people from civil society and gender particularly, the way they have suffered during this entire period. This solidarity, I mean, it's not only that the Pakistan here is, the sort of marking that day of 5th of February, standing in solidarity with Kashmiris, but I guess it's the responsibility of those who believe in the just values of democracy and human rights, and also on humanity, that Kashmiris are pained, they have suffered, and they are suffered in a way that is unprecedented. Not only it's about political rights, but the way the entire fabric of society is suffered through occupation, and in a way that it's something which is, I guess, which requires a collective response from internationally as well. I know, I mean, there's a time which is difficult when it comes to the human rights, when it comes to the basic fundamental rights of the people, and the states particularly are more using force, democracy, and these liberal values are set aside. But when it comes to the civil society and the groups, I guess there is a need to further aware and tell people the story of Kashmir, a story which is largely unheard, and because the people, those who are occupied or under occupation, there are very less spaces to articulate, because it's very, very difficult to bring out the stories of sufferings. So that's the one aspect that I've been thinking, and I've been just, I wanted to share that this is the responsibility of those who believe in these just values of, human rights, sorry, and self-determination, that they must come up with these stories and tell the world and share the way the young, I mean the children are pelleted. This is something unbearable, and this is painful. On the other side, when you talk about the historical nature of this conflict, I mean, post-partition, if you see that, There's a one very fundamental argument that I believe that the political disputes, having of course these legal backgrounds, you have to have certain sort of negotiation and settlement for these conflicts. Otherwise, you further complicate these conflicts, and that's exactly what happened with Kashmir. I mean, India took that action in 2019. I guess it's out of desperation, I must say, because at the end of the day, the society, when you come across the people, their resilience, their resilience for to achieve the right to self-determination, and then almost all this section of the society, when they chipped in and they articulate in a very sort of unified voice. And then if you're a democracy, you should have a democratic response to these questions. But over the period of time, if you see Pakistan, India engaged over Kashmir, may it be Shimla Accord, may it be other accords, may it be, peace processes and other. The fundamental and the core issue remains over there, and they have been engaging on this issue. Historically, they've been working, of course, there is a reference point of United Nations Security Council resolutions, and I guess the very edifice of it is built on the right to self-determination. But its denial over the period of time has further complicated this. And the mayors, at the end of the day, state if you don't have answer to these political questions, and you don't have a democratic spirit to deal and engage people, at the end of the day you resort to violence, and that's what exactly is happening in Kashmir. And that has not brought any solution to it, but it has further complicated. I mean, what you call normalcy, I mean, keeping people silence and bringing that silence due to your force, sheer pressure, by eliminating basic rights and you sort of squeezing these civic spaces. If you do all these things and then you expect that there is a normalcy, it's a very relative term then.
But of course, you pointed out a very important thing over here, the use of violence against the innocent people. More and more suppression there has been going on the part of Indian regime, its occupation forces over there. Doesn't that naturally lead a resentment at a wider scale and ultimately making the people to stand up and fight back for the just right?
I guess the very nature of the resistance over there is for their fundamental right. Now, when the state uses the violence, actually, that is the last resort, because you don't, in the perspective of Kashmir, I must say they don't have an answer to their questions. So, of course, that is the last resort, but in the history of Kashmir, and particularly their society, if you have seen that they have not succumbed to these tactics particularly. Civil society, people, gender, political leadership for that matter, at the end of the day you resorted to cage them. I mean, at the end of the day, what is the ultimate solution to that? You put them behind the bars, you have to slash their political, civic and other rights. So what we need to understand is that the very nature of the resistance is actually anchored on the narrative and argument of fundamental rights. So no matter what sort of measures you take to suppress these voices, at the end of the day you have to create that mechanism where people have choice, and you have to enable people to articulate their aspirations. Otherwise, sooner or later, there is always a shelf life of these violence measures and all these things. You can't cage all the time all the society. Then in the changing dynamics of the world, the truth of Kashmir would come out across, and the world would listen to that.
Mr. Wani, how have the Kashmiris responded to this continuous violence on the part of Indian regime and its occupation forces over the decades? And what sort of protection do you think the international law or any sort of mechanism give to the people who are under continuous oppression and illegal occupation like this?
You see, as far as how people of Kashmir resisted to these atrocities, to the repression what the Indian army is carrying out in occupied Kashmir, we have seen for the last 35 years, at least most recent history in last 35 years, we have seen a continuous military operation in occupied Kashmir. And what for was this military occupation? This was to subdue the people's resistance, peaceful resistance against the occupation for the realization of their rights. Despite all forces which what the stats you show us, what has happened in Kashmir, there is much more what has happened in Kashmir, what the Indian forces have done in Kashmir. But despite that, because the people have their own narrative. They think, they believe in that India is an occupier and they have a right to self-determination, and they will continue to fight for that, be it peacefully, through different means. They did it. They raised their voice, and their voices were echoed even in international forums, also at different places. So people of Kashmir, even then, at this point of time, when after 5th of August, Government of India tried to change the demography of Indian occupied Kashmir, they tried to change the political landscape there, they tried to change the religious landscape in there. But despite that, the people are continuously resisting. India is not there at ease at all, because they say normalcy. The doctors were talking about normalcy. When they say normalcy, if there is normalcy in Kashmir, why this type of force there? Why so densely you have populated Kashmir with your armed forces? Why you are arming these armed forces with these black laws? If it is normalcy there, if everything is good there, if people are happy with you, what you say to the international audience that people of Kashmir are very much happy with it, there are certain elements who create this. If there is everything right, why 900,000 troops? Why there is these draconian laws? Why India has not lifted any of these laws, when repealed any of these laws?
There is
when
continuous communication clampdown also.
Yeah, when it was asked by the United Nations Human Rights Commission to do it, when they were asked by the special procedures to do it, when the Human Rights Committee asked them to repeal the Armed Forces Special Power Act, and also ratify the torture, Convention Against Torture and Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. But India doesn't give heed to that. They continue their military repression in Kashmir, and they bring more and more forces, and more recently they bought about 2,000 this SSGs from the India to guard the some place of Jammu. But having said that, the people of Kashmir are very much determined. You might have listened to some of the interviews, very small interviews, because people are very much fearful of the reprisals they face when they talk about it, because all the political leadership, all human rights defenders, they are caged because of this. But the international response we have seen, there is a responsibility of international community. And when we talk of the international laws, international law, first and fundamentally, the UN Security Council resolutions are there that say that the people of Kashmir will decide their political future through free and fair plebiscite. There are international human rights law and humanitarian law that's applicable to the region. But unfortunately, you say that international laws, they don't have their own teeth. They borrow teeth from the Security Council or from the political governments. So that is why those laws do not swing in, and Kashmiris continue to suffer because of the double standards of some of the international actors who don't condemn India for its human rights. They privately they say we are talking to India, we are talking to this, but they don't condemn the crimes against humanity what India is doing in occupied Kashmir for last at least 35 years, and more importantly the way they have changed all the landscapes in Kashmir in last 6 years.
Right, Dr. Kausar. Now, on the pretext of development and bringing in normalcy, the situation on the ground seemed to have worsened. As Mr. Wani has also said, that enactment of 200 new laws, there has been a clear drive of changing the demography over there as well. I mean, all these things, even we have seen there's been criticism, this particular issue had been discussed at important international fora at that particular point in time when the revocation of Article 370 took place. This was discussed in a number of Western parliaments also. Now, with all this track record of Indian occupation forces over there, what's required in order to ensure the implementation of those relevant UN Security Council resolutions? Is there any specific mechanism which has already been chalked out in order to enforce those UNSC resolutions?
I mean, see, when you talk about bringing in laws and changing, bringing structural changes, particularly over there, I mean, this was very much expected from BJP because of its very exclusive nature of policies, which are very much sort of exclusive and plus sort of a divisive politics that they do. There are the other side of it is also that the Kashmir is a multi-ethnic diverse society, particularly when we talk about that, having different communities living together in harmony from centuries, in fact. The downside of such politics is that when you engage in such sort of politics and then resultantly you divide the communities and then you pitch different communities against each other for your own politics, which might serve a short purpose, but in long term it's quite destabilizing and it has a very deep down impact on the society, and you are further creating chaos in the society. Actually, you are not stabilizing it, you are further alienating people. And in the context of Kashmir, when you see these laws were like domicile laws or some other, when you see that they have bring in some geographical changes in the territories, in the boundaries and all these things, when you see the communities sort of came, sort of against each other, they were pitched against each other. There are always, sort of fault lines within the communities.
Do we also understand that this is a systematic ethnic cleansing also?
Absolutely.
Through the enactment of this domicile law, which is aimed at changing the demography.
See, the dream of changing the demography and particularly convert, sort of creating that imbalance. Particularly, it's an old dream of BJP. But what I'm saying is that once you are trying to do in a society, the very nature, the very existence of the society is compromised, and you challenge that, and this is very difficult. And this is what happened in Kashmir, that many tribes and the people, particularly living in the mountainous regions, they were pitched against each other under the name of the quotas and all that. What we need to understand is that BJP, the politics of BJP in Kashmir, once it failed in argument actually, so they have resorted to a strategy of further complicating it, so that people are engaged in issues which are non-issues, particularly at that time, but you are trying to engage them in issues and trying to dissuade them from the very fundamental core issue. But what I'm saying that this is a counterproductive. This never happens. And in the Kashmir, if you've seen that, what Wani Sahab has mentioned, that a new operations and all these things to sort of round up people, this is an indication that look, these all laws, these all regulations, these all changes are taken, are done in a society where there is an acceptance. The people actually are not accepting it because there is as such no mechanism of consulting. Even once you have changed the status of Kashmir, you have not taken into the confidence of any sort of political leadership. This itself shows that such exclusive politics is actually not geared towards empowering Kashmiris, but it might serve a larger political agenda.
Further complicates the situation. So that is the very divisive agenda of the Bharatiya Janata Party in particular, driven by the Hindutva ideology. What about the other mainstream parties that have been governing India, for example, the Indian National Congress?
See, the problem is when it comes to Kashmir, almost all the parties behaved in a similar way. That has been the dark side of the Indian politics, that they have been championing democracy and human rights and all that. But of course,
there has been a ruckus when this particular act was happening. As it was happening, there was a ruckus in the Indian Parliament at that particular time. We also saw the leader of the opposition, Ghulam Nabi Azad, at that particular point in time also raised this particular issue. He went to Iiojk at that particular point in time, came back with the findings, and he said it was the reign of terror over there.
See, not only him, I mean, there have been many organizations and the coalitions of the civil society and other from the mainland India, for that matter, they've been writing a lot on these things. But if you see the decision of the Supreme Court and if you see the other institutions, it's very evident that it's a very biased when it comes to Kashmir. Right. So if you say about the other political parties, that has been the downside. And the unfortunate with Kashmir is particularly that these standards are not of human rights and liberal values, what they proclaimed within mainstream India. When it comes to the rights of Kashmiris, they have been almost the same. That's the sad part of it. You talked about the international intervention and the United Nations institutions. I guess, see, there is, I mean, there's a sad part of it that the international multilateral institutions, the institutions like United Nations Security Council, I mean, they've been not very effective over the period of the time. There are many reasons, of course, economic reasons. The states are dominating, states with the more economic power, and their alliances are actually, and their own personal agendas particularly, our economic agenda is prevailing more. But
But given
fundamental
the fact,
question is,
don't they realize the threat of this particular?
see, that's what I'm coming. That's what I'm coming. The problem is, from last 2-3 decades, if you see that these states have been doing that, the major states. I mean, UNSC has not been very effective, or for that matter, Human Rights Council and other institutions. But from the last these period of time, if you see that the impact of it is very difficult and dangerous for the world. You have the Palestinian conflict in front of you. You have the world which is more destabilized, if you ask me. You have many militant groups, you have many organizations, those who are away from these political processes, challenging autonomies. You have more threats of other, sort of the groups. So that's because once you don't address these issues, and these international institutions, once they don't stand with the fundamental rights, what they have propagating and what they have been saying, it's UNSC and United Nations at the end of the day asking and ensuring Kashmiris for their right to self-determination, and passing so many resolutions as well, engaging in so many debates as well. So I guess this is also a challenge for the global system, that if you don't resolve these issues, or you don't become very vibrant.
But what about Mr. Wani, I'll come to you also for these important points. Let me first take Dr. Costa's view on this. What about if the international community collectively hasn't been able to implement those UNSC resolutions, has been unable to fulfill its responsibility? What about if a major power offers mediation? We saw that offer of mediation happening during the first tenure of President Donald Trump, which was of course rejected by India itself.
See, I mean, there is always a hope and chance that this might happen. But I guess there's also there's a other way to look at this. That it's good. Pakistan has been always asking for the resolution of this dispute through dialogue, which is important. The problem on the other side is that is a policy of non-engagement, which is, I don't think so, is a democracy or democratic in nature. That I guess ultimately they need to understand that this is a region of billions of people. You have to engage with each other. You have to talk. You have to give primacy to the voices of the Kashmiris. You have to listen to them and create that enabling environment where you could come to this level of conflict resolution, or build that mechanism where Kashmiris have to articulate themselves. There is always way of, the international institutions are there. But of course, this policy of engagement, keeping the dialogue open, and particularly on the issue like Jammu and Kashmir, I guess this is very important and significant, and this can pay the way. I guess this sanity must prevail, if not today, any day. I mean, it will prevail, because at the end of the day, there is no alternate to this engagement, particularly when it comes to the issue of Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. Mr. Wani, the divisive politics, that Hindutva-driven agenda of the Bharatiya Janata Party, do the other mainstream parties take the Kashmir issue differently as compared to that of Bharatiya Janata Party? And then when we talk about if the international community collectively has been unable to go for a certain resolution of this particular issue in the light of those relevant UN Security Council resolutions, is there any chance of any major country giving an opportunity of mediation, and perhaps the two sides could sit on the table, as we had seen that mediation offer already made by President Donald Trump? He's currently leading the United States of America also.
There are many things. As per Mr. Trump is concerned, United States offer for any negotiation or any mediation on Kashmir is concerned. I don't think that was in his previous tenure. Whether it is for this tenure or not, it is to be seen. That's first. The second thing is that as United Nations, the world order, which was in place from 1945, I think that has now become out of date at present. We could see that United Nations Security Council is polarized. They are not, they don't engage at any of the conflicts which are around the globe, and that's why we see more and more conflicts there. So I don't see any international actor engaging in it so very soon, and India accepting it very soon, because the kind of regime we have in India, they are not for any of the multilateralism. They don't believe in that, and they have categorically, during Trump, they deny each and everything. Even from UN Secretary General also offered his good offices for it. That was also rejected by India, because Indians think they can do it by power. That is their might. When we say that in different political parties of India, you see there have been two parties ruling, either it was Congress or then it was now the BJP. Congress ruled Kashmir through agencies, through its intelligence agencies. They tried to cover Kashmir, they tried to maneuver things in Kashmir and all that. But the BJP has a political agenda in Kashmir. They have come with the agenda of Hindutva directly. They are imposing that agenda, and for that agenda they abrogated Article 370, 35A, they changed the domicile law, they changed many things, and they are constructing the new pilgrimage sites in Kashmir. They are trying to find out more and more temples where they can be, to build those temples, to which I said earlier, that to change the religious landscape of Kashmir. So they have come with this, they have a mission. They have come with this mission. Whether they succeed or not, till date we have seen they failed in all their attempts. Whatever they wanted to do, they could do it in paper. In paper they changed the domicile law. On paper they have done everything. But when we go to practice, we saw after doing that delimitation, not taking into consideration neither the population ratio nor the geographical connectivity, even then they lost. They could not win the votes of the people of Kashmir. People of Kashmir rejected this scheme of things. And likewise, the people of Kashmir are very much alive. You cannot make them as anything that whatever the Indian government wants to do, they can do. They are trying, as you talked about the development, but they sell about that we have done development investment in Kashmir. But the stats in Kashmir say the unemployment ratio has risen in Kashmir from 18 to 27% is unemployment ratio. We have seen that under these kinds of development, which is meant for the domestic, for the defense purposes only, we have seen that our orchards, the paddy fields of people, and also the ecosystem has become victim of all these development projects which are there. And now yesterday I was seeing a report from the BBC that the railway, which they celebrated very much, they have a railway from Delhi to Srinagar. It is the most costly, but the one which will go in loss. This one, and the very much fragile system of railway. So they all need to showcase to the international community that we are doing the development in Kashmir, and this is the settler colonialism in other way. They are trying to bring the people from outside to settle in Kashmir, but the people of Kashmir, so far they have resisted, they will continue to resist this.
Right, you already talked of how the Indian Supreme Court legitimized this particular illegal, unconstitutional act of Indian government, which was of course led by Bharatiya Janata Party at that particular point in time. You already said that the approach of the Indian Supreme Court before that was quite different. It didn't allow the revocation of the Article 370, but this time around when it happened, it was legitimized by the Indian Supreme Court. Doesn't that naturally bring into question the credibility of the judicial system, of the highest seat of justice, of the so-called largest democracy in the world?
It has. It is not that we question it. It is that even Indians question it. For the first time, we could say that 4 Supreme Court judges, they had one press conference against the Supreme Court Chief Justice and others, because the BJP tried, they have tried this time to what we can say, to make each and every organ of the government that should be represent Hindutva. That is their message. And the way the Justice Yogi, who gave the decision, and then he was promoted as the Lieutenant Governor of a state, and so on and so forth. As he retired from there, he was given that post. So the Indian Supreme Court has lost its credibility when it comes to Kashmir. Even in Indian jurists, the legal jurists of India, if you read their papers, opinion papers, what they said after before the judgment, after the abrogation, before the judgment, and after this judgment, that all legal luminaries of India have said this is not justice, this is rather political, they have been obliged to the political will of the BJP.
Right, Dr. Kausar, what usually happens to be the attitude or the approach of the judiciary or the judicial system as an overall when we talk about a country being a democracy and also claiming being the largest democracy in the world? What ideally should be the approach of the judicial system there?
See, if you remember, there was a decision in case of a Kashmiri citizen. He was hanged,
Afzal
Guru, and it was written that it was to satisfy the national conscience of people. This really reflects how the system operates and frames the argument when it comes to Kashmir. I guess this is indeed a very sad and a time to question the very system of judiciary particularly. I guess when it comes to the disputed territories like Jammu and Kashmir, no matter you try to claim them or you try to mainstream them, but the institutional approach and biases remains there. You can't change them actually. And this is what we have seen in the context of Article 370's judgment and in the past as well, that there have been a very open, biased decision making. And if you see that there are many prisoners, the people, those who have been put behind the bars, I mean, not given enough. I mean, it's not us, but it's international community also writing on that they should be given a fair chance to represent, and given that chance to represent themselves, and it didn't happen. So I guess the very nature of the institutional bias when it comes to the disputed territories, it remains there no matter, because fundamentally you know from inside that the very political question we don't have the answer. And then you try to sort of navigate things, and you don't do the justice then to the society and system, and that's over there that you have seen that. And I guess the entire question hovers around one important argument, that until unless you don't resolve those conflicts, and particularly the engage with the communities, these issues, these injustices, these violations of rights and all these things will keep continue, because you are not engaging with the fundamental question, and you are just sort of operating outside in the peripheries, and that's not the solution.
So when all the sides are, when you're being expressed from all the sides, there is no hope from the judicial system also, as in this particular case from the Indian Supreme Court also. The prisoners are not even given the right to of the representation as well as the free trial. So what remains to be the option, the last resort at the hands of the Kashmiris?
I mean, for Kashmiris, I mean, they've hit the bottom. I guess what else you can do, you sort of slash the identity, and then you sort of change the very dynamics, try to change the dynamics of the society. You economically sort of, under the name of empowerment, you disempower actually. You're allowing people to come to have jobs and all these things. And you sort of, slash their scholarships and the rights of the jobs and all these things. I guess you have sort of tried all sorts of tactics to sort of paralyze the society, but it didn't happen. So I guess justice and truth has its own strength, and that's what the very nature of within the Kashmir and particularly the Kashmiri society, that is I guess the hope that helps them sustain and resist, and they'll keep doing that.
Right, Dr. Kausar, you already in your first take talked of the stories of suffering. Right? These stats by the Kashmir Media Service, Mr. Wani is of the view there's much more as far as these stats are concerned. There's much more than that. We've also seen you talked of how the pellet guns have been used, how human shields have been used, how rape has been used as a weapon of war. Also, I mean, there is a long list of gross human rights violations. Most recently, we've also seen, when you specifically talk of these stories of sufferings should come to the fore, there's been a continuous communication clampdown ever since that revocation of Article 370 happened. Not only that, the international media was not even allowed to go over there and report from there. The draconian laws like Public Safety Act and the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act have been used with impunity against journalists, the photographers. They've not been even issued the visas to go abroad and participate in international conferences. On the other side, we have seen the sort of digital storytelling and the cinema, the use of cinema at the hands of the Indians I mean, how do you look at that? Because it has been a sheer propaganda on the part of Indian regime through the use of digital storytelling as well as through cinema.
Yeah.
The number of movies which have been made regarding as to this particular dispute, speaking completely otherwise to what the factual or the ground situation is.
See, yeah, I mean, they have been doing it in terms of course, when you have that infrastructure with you, you have the exposure and experience, and then you have this state support. They have used it as a sort of a medium to further sort of expand their occupation and of course sort of bring in counter the narrative of the Kashmir. But I guess we need to sorry, excuse me, we need to analyze one important thing is that did that help? Did that dent the very on the narrative of the Kashmiris? I guess it didn't, because what I talked about, the truth and the very nature of the the reality, it has its own
dent that very resistance, that very spirit. What about the international community? What about the major powers?
guess,
When
see,
that particular
yeah.
piece of that particular
Yeah,
movie or a
I
film
want to-
goes to the Western countries and that digital storytelling through the internet goes there?
I
So
guess
what sort of
that's where I
effect does
want
it leave
to
on
come
them?
that when you talk about solidarity, it's not solidarity only coming onto the roads. I guess there is also solidarity that has to be at intellectual level as well, as a solidarity that has to engage international community on that side. It's the responsibility. That's what I initially said in the initial conversation, that it's the responsibility. As a civil society activist, there is a certain responsibility when you talk that you are a human rights activist, you are a civil society activist, you have the responsibility to help engage and help transfer those stories to the international world and the communities. And I guess particularly the region of Iiojk you have, I guess it's a responsibility of that government also, the people, those are part of that disputed state, it's their fundamental responsibility also to help their brethren, sisters, to help sort of transfer their narrative, their stories, and help internet and sort of help them to for international community to listen and sort of transmit their stories in a very factual way. And that's, I guess, the
I get your point. Unfortunately, we're short of time. There's a lot that needs to be discussed on this particular front. The stories of suffering should come to the fore. The international community should be more sensitized about it. We've seen Pakistan has been playing its part regarding that. What about that digital storytelling? A number of movies I've myself watched, and I was like, this is a blatant lie. Look what they are saying through their movies.
This is what you said. Actually, it backfired India in Kashmir. And in occupied Kashmir, this propaganda backfired them. You have the people, when they see it, they see this is all fraud. This is not the reality. So the people become more and more alienated.
But the way they craft it.
When they crafted it very nicely. They gave, Indian government gave each other. But you can see when they had a film fair at Goa, and one of the experts who was the jury expert from Israel, he was Israeli. When he saw, even Israeli, when he saw it, he said, it is all propaganda. This is not a movie. This is, it looks total propaganda. Even that kind of man, and I think the people of Kashmir, what we are doing at present we might be powerless to prevent the injustice which are being committed. But we have decided to continue to protest till we come to the power and we prevent them from injustice.
Mr. Altaf and Wani, Chairman, Kashmir Institute of International Relations, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Waqas Kausar, Kashmir Affairs expert. Dr. Kausar, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.
Thank you, Dr.